Today on Ag News, we're talking replacement females for your herd. We're also talking all the new exports for all the beef. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hello everyone, welcome to Ag News. I'm Duane Rigsby, John Grimes here. John, I'm always glad to sit down and talk with you for a few minutes about this stuff. It seems like we just don't get to sit down and talk a lot, but it's becoming fall.
Yeah, if you drive around, I think you're seeing all kinds of evidence of that. To me, the leaves aren't turning as quick this year. We've had so much moisture. Yeah. Trees aren't drying out as quick, and look at the grass and the field crops. I mean, they just didn't seem to turn as quick this year.
Yeah,
I think when crops have moisture, they're going to stay greener longer. And I know we've still had to mow our yard a little more frequently than you would this time of year. But you drive around, you see farmers in the fields harvesting corn and soybeans. Probably got an earlier start on silage, harvesting that, and you'll see the white bags around the field. You don't see as many upright silos as you do bags anymore. It seems like.
Is that just because of the sheer maintenance of it?
I think so. And if you take a case like myself, I don't particularly like heights.
Well, yeah, I guess you would have to climb up there.
There's more maintenance. There's more maintenance with the vertical silos. I think you're seeing more people going to bunkers or the in-ground bunkers, or I don't see too many of the wood-sided or concrete-sided bunkers like we used to, but you do see what I call the bread loaves, the white plastic bags as you drive around, and I think it's more convenience and less maintenance. Now they do require a certain degree of management. You got to pay attention to moisture, and when you go to feed it and you open up that bag, you got to kind of regularly dip into it so it doesn't spoil, so to speak. So that's a lot of what you see going on. Seasonal work, again, harvest being the priority. I think we talk about seedings, where we're seeding permanent pasture, hay fields, whatever. Probably the only other crops that we think about now would be annuals such as wheat, rye, things like that. But we're getting into the fall and days are getting shorter. You see less daylight, and I've noticed a few people making hay harvest a little late. We got to be careful about that because of the plant needs to get ready for winter. So the shorter the residue, probably the more chance for stress. If we have a real hard cold winter, we need to have a little vegetation cover going into the winter. So those would be the main field activities going on.
Right. Okay. But I guess the biggest thing we're talking, you wanted to talk about today was the replacement of the females in the herd.
In the herd, Right. And our first picture that we have will kind of show what's going on a lot around the state, and that's weaning calves. We're taking spring-born calves off of their mothers. After a while, the cow will do it herself, but typically we take calves away from the mothers sometime in that 6 to 8 month range of age. I think we've talked about this before. Over 80% of the calves typically are born in the spring. So now we're getting about that time of year where we would remove the calves from the mothers so they can build back condition and get prepared for the next calf. It's kind of the circle of life thing. We have a production cycle, and if most calves are born in February, March, and April, we're taking them off in the fall, September, October, November, and then they'll start the process over again. But the cow needs to kind of recuperate and build back her sources. So, the challenge for farmers, and this is a business decision we're making now, is that we showed the group of calves. So, say this is a fancy heifer calf that we're looking at that maybe you want to put it back in the herd to make a cow. Maybe she needs to replace her mother. Her mother's getting some age on her, and so we're looking at what's this calf worth today as a wean calf. calf. We could be selling her as a feeder calf on the market.
Yeah.
But, so if we're going to calve in February, March, and April, we have to develop that heifer calf so that we can breed her next spring and early summer to make her pregnant or get her pregnant so we can put her back in the herd. So this is the next step of the process. This would be a yearling bred heifer.
Okay.
That, knowing what I know about this one, this was probably mid-gestation or late early trimester, middle trimester type age. She's probably about 16, 17 months old, hopefully pregnant, and as a prospect to add to the herd. And then eventually, she's going to develop and we're going to take care of her. And the next slide will show what we're ultimately after is a female that has a newborn calf to add to the herd. And it's a long process, Duane. If we bred a cow today with the idea that we're going to make a replacement female, to get to this point, what you're seeing right here is we're talking 33 months.
33 months.
It's 9 months gestation, or 283 days, and then typically we calve out our heifers at 2 years of age. So you take 24 plus 9, that's 33 months. That's a long time.
Just before you get the first calf out.
First calf out, so
you got to do a lot of planning ahead.
Yeah, so right here we're looking at probably 7, 8 month old heifers. There's a little bit of variation there. You can see like the calf on the right, left is a little smaller. So there's a lot of economics. There's a lot of management decisions that go from this stage to that calf we showed. So it's there's some tough decisions. And what we're going to go through here is a presentation I've given a few times with farmers on talking about making these decisions. It's a challenge. So you get, just like anything on the farm, you have to have a strategy. So I think our first text slide will talk about that. There's some things that we need to consider, and there are several things. What kind of available feed do you have, and what are feed costs? Historically, right now, corn prices are relatively economical if you're buying feed. Now, if you're a grain farmer, you're thinking they're terrible. You'd like to see them be higher priced. So,
but if you're feeding, that's good.
So we don't have to feed a lot of corn, but that wean calf, say from the second picture where we're looking at that weaned heifer to the bred heifer, she probably needs to gain at least 1.5 pounds a day, 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds a day to properly develop. When we talk about at time of breeding or reaching puberty where they're able to get bred, at breeding time, which is typically around 15 months, they'll get to puberty depending on the breed and the size of the animal. They'll get to puberty 12 to 15 months of age. That's when they'll get there. So from the time they're weaned till the time that we're talking about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds a day of gain. So you can do it with really good hay or combination with some grain. Labor availability, somebody's got to take care of them and manage them, and a lot of beef producers work off the farm. So that's a part of the decision-making process. What's your farm like? You talk about environmental and facility restrictions. Do you have a lot that you can keep these heifers separate? I will contend, and I've said this in front of a lot of farmer groups, from the time they're weaned till the time they have that first calf, they definitely should be managed as a separate group. You should not ask that weaned calf to compete with a mature cow for feed. So
you should lot them off.
Exactly. And that's that environmental and facility restrictions we're talking about. So I think that's very important. Historical reproduction rates. How good are you with your bull or your artificial breeding technician at getting cattle bred? Desired genetic composition. What do you want your herd of cows to be. Do you want them to be purebred? Do you want them to be crossbred? Do you want them big? Do you want them small? Those are all factors we have to consider, and whether we're going to raise them or buy them. And then, what's the potential for genetic improvement within your herd or buying them? So these are all part of the strategy. There's some other things, we need to consider. The next slide, I think we talk about the price of feeder calves. When you looked at that group of calves at the beginning, what are they worth?
Yeah.
Is it kind of a bird in the hand versus two in the bush decision? Are you better off selling them now? We've talked about this, 2014 and 15 prices were record high.
Yeah.
Feeder calves in 2014 and 15 were worth almost $1 a pound more then than today. So that was a different decision.
Yeah.
If you don't want to raise them and you want to buy a bred heifer or a cow, what are they worth? What's the market for those animals? And we'll talk about that as we go along. Typically we talk about culling rates. You have to replace some every year because of age of the cow, or maybe a cow gets hurt or we can't get her bred. So when we talk about culling rate, animals removed from the herd, what is that? Typically we're talking 15 to 20%. That's what's typically need to be replaced. Interest rates, we talked about this being a long process. You may have to borrow money to fund either purchasing or feeding, one or the other. And in the last week we talked about cash flow needs. So those are all factors that if you're trying to decide, do I raise that heifer or buy her, those factors all go into it. Okay. So next we're going to talk about what do we look for in replacement females. So what are we consider maternal traits. Maternal, she's going to raise calves for us, so she has to have some maternal quality. I always tell farmers there's two things. The most important traits are fertility and calving ease. If we do not get the animal pregnant and don't get a live calf out of her, the rest of it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter color, shape, size, how fast they grow. If we don't have them fertile to get pregnant and then deliver a live calf, to me those are the most two important traits.
Can I ask a question here, John? How do you judge when you're going to get that use artificial to make that calf?
Artificial or a bull.
Yeah, either way. When you first start that process, how long before you know that calf's pregnant, or can you do it again?
We can diagnose pregnancy by blood, pull a blood test at about 30 days. So if you know the cow was bred today, you wait 30 days to pull blood. Okay. The typical vet out in the country that does the traditional rectal palpation, I would say a really skilled vet, you're probably talking 35, 40 days, just before they can feel some things in there. Ultrasound, which lets us take a visual picture. A really skilled ultrasound technician, which is doing the same thing as a traditional vet, but they're actually taking a picture.
Just taking a picture from the outside.
27 to 30 days, because you don't really see the calf then, but you can see
like an embryo.
Fluid. You can see fluid forming in the uterus. So that means as far as seeing the fetus, probably 30 to 35 days. So,
and if you don't see something in that time frame, is that enough time to try to rebreed?
Yes. Now that's a decision producers have to make, is how long do they want their calving season to be? And it's got to work for your situation. But I would say for most producers, there's really no economic justification to go past 90 days. And I say that, you saw that first group of calves. When you get much past that, you'll get so much lack of uniformity. And if you're going to manage those cattle, the longer the calving window, the more difficult to make vaccinations, feeding decisions, marketing decisions. A lot of what I would call aggressive producers are looking at 45 to 60 days.
So really you have one chance to rebreed. I'm thinking.
Well, 2 or 3.
You think 2 or
3? If you say, okay, I'm going to start breeding cows today, you can synchronize them and get as many in heat at one time as you can if you're doing artificial breeding. And so say if you're doing 45 days, which is really aggressive, if today was day one, then you've got two 21-day cycles additional, so I say 3.
Okay.
That takes aggressive management to do that, but I would say if you're just doing natural breeding and letting a bull do it for 60 to 90, 2 or 3 shots.
Okay.
Now,
so that's not going to, at the end, that's not going to give you too much of a, a small calf and a little larger calf if you're, the herd is maybe there's only 4 or something that didn't get bred the first time out.
So that's that calling rate we're talking about.
Yeah.
If you limit it the length of the breeding season, they have less chances to get pregnant. You may at the end of the time wind up with more open females, and therefore you have to keep a couple extra replacements or buy them.
Okay.
So that's kind of what we look at. So other maternal traits, I can assure you that the average beef producer is probably a little older than the average farmer. So disposition is very important. How they act. You don't want crazy ones.
Right.
Mature size. To do it, what I think is the right strategy is you want your cow to be moderate sized and get a little more growth from the bull. It's think about how many mouths that you're feeding. If you've got 20 cows, would you rather them weigh 1,300 pounds or 1,500 pounds? Well, I know which one's going to have the bigger feed bill.
Right.
So maybe you get a little more of the extra pounds by using just a little bigger bull, a bull with more growth.
Yeah.
Fleshing ability, these are forage consumers. They're ruminants. We need them to put on weight by eating grass. Structural correctness, this isn't what I would call a harsh environment, but we have hills. They got to negotiate, so they need to be good on their feet and legs. Milking ability to feed that calf is important. Udder structure, I don't like to mess with a bad udder when a cow calves. As long as the calf can get a hold of the teats and strip them out and take care of it. And then muscling, we talk about, it's not necessarily a maternal trait, but we want some volume and capacity and shape to the cow. So those are some of the traits we consider important as far as maternal. So the nuts and bolts of this, there are definite advantages to either raising or buying the female. And the first slide we're going to talk about is the advantage of raising.
Okay.
Your herd, you have had some say in the genetics, and so it's kind of a given commodity, and hopefully you've done a good job over the years of letting your genetics adapt to your environment. I think that's really important. You know something about them. You can make an accurate evaluation. You know who the bigger, heavier calves were at weaning time in your herd. You're not bringing anything in, so the biosecurity issue is real.
They've been vaccinated or whatever.
Or you know what's been done to them.
Yeah.
And you're not bringing something in from an outside location. And they may cost less to raise than buying them. I don't think this is always true, but that's why I use the word may. You can control your costs within the herd.
When you buy, John, do you just instantly throw them right into the herd, or do you kind of section them off?
You should
lot them off for a while.
This is a harsh term, but you should quarantine them from the rest of the herd for a bit. Let them get adjusted. So that's one of the issues with buying heifers. That was our next, or females. I said heifers, but you can do this with young cows as well. What could you do with your herd if you didn't have to separate that group off like we were talking and feed them? Basically what we're talking about, if you raise them or buy them, if you buy them, you're going to cut off basically a year of the production cycle from the time they're weaned till we got them pregnant.
Right.
So that's something you have to look at. What would it allow? Could you run more cows if you didn't have?
You could feasibility reduce your cost, right?
Well,
to a degree, or
you
am I
can
thinking
shift
backwards?
your cost. You can shift your cost. It's kind of that pay me now, pay me later. If you change oil in your car, you got to go buy the oil, you've got to spend the time to do it, you got to have a set of ramps, that kind of thing.
Or you just take it somewhere.
Yes.
Okay.
That's an apples and orange example, but think about, do you invest in a
It's
carport?
not really going to save you that much.
No, it's not.
All it is more time for you.
All I'm asking is you be honest with your costs in your operation.
That's true. I agree.
you can change the genetic focus. If you buy the females, maybe versus raising them, you can buy specifically what you want. Maybe you can put a little more emphasis on growth or carcass traits. You can expand your herd quicker and change your breeding program by what you buy. Maybe, I know this is humbling for a farmer to say, but maybe somebody's doing a better job than you, and you can buy better genetics.
Better replacements, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I think it may cost less if you figure the extra constraints in your operation. So it's just until you budget, you don't know.
Right.
So the next slide talks about economics, and we talked about that 33 months till that new calf was born. You know, I bred that cow today, from conception till we wean her calf, there's costs.
Right.
We got to take care of that calf from weaning to breeding. There's costs associated there. Now, till we pregnancy check them, whether we do it through blood or ultrasound or traditional, you got to add those costs up, and then to compare that to what replacement females cost. That's the decision you have to make. And Dr. Harlan Hughes, a retired professor out of North Dakota State, he's put out as much information as anybody that I know about budgeting and making these strategic decisions, and that is why we put it out. Let's bring up that slide again. So what can we buy heifers for? The early projections for the coming year, based on Dr. Hughes's budgets and sales that I've been around to already, you know, this is a wide range, but $1,200 to $2,000 is what you could buy. And if you're honest with your budgeting, those 3 periods that we talked about, you're going to fall in that range.
Okay.
Now, some people say, well, I can't find them. My response to that is you're not looking very hard. Right. They're out there.
They're out there.
They're out there. So let's keep moving along here and talk about some of the other things. Why do we see price variation? I think our next slide talks about inventory. You know, prices were high in 14 and 15, and the old economics lesson of supply and demand was why. Look at that dip in 14 and 15 in numbers. 2014, our cow inventory in this country was the lowest it had been in 60 years. And that's why the inventory was low. Now, farmers are pretty smart. They'll respond to prices and see how numbers have leveled back up. But basically, since 2014 to what we expect to see in the beginning of 19 and 20, 3 million more cows. Wow. So prices are cheaper. So I guess what I'm saying to you, you're making a decision. They're not going to be as expensive to buy this coming year as they would have been back in 2014 and 15. So these are factors that go into it. So, you know, that's to wrap this up as far as this topic, I just think you have to be honest with your costs in your own operation. You know, we've talked about the average herd size in this state is 17 cows, roughly. Our typical replacement rate is going to be 16 to 18%. So let's just round it off, say 20 cows, 15 to 20% replacement rate. You're going to keep 3 or 4 heifers. Can you justify keeping 3 or 4 heifers for that long period of time, or are you better off buying a replacement? And think about what that does to impact your breeding decisions to the rest of the herd. I just ask for producers to be honest with themselves, and I think, you know, for a lot of guys, it may be better to buy them. And if you have trouble finding them, let me know, because they're out there. So let's shift gears as we wind up today. You know, we always talk about meat and trade and domestic consumption. I think we've got some interesting figures of what exports have done throughout this year. The black bar on these next 3 or 4 countries we're going to show represents 2018. The blue bar represents a 5-year average, and the red bar is what we did last year. And I think you're going to see a basic trend here, but Japan's been our #1 export destination for beef for several years. In fact, it's Southeast Asia has been really strong, but this country and the next one are the ones that we're seeing such growth with. South Korea, it's been pretty amazing what South Korea has done, especially when you compare the recent history, this is where we've seen such a growth in exports. And we talk about politically.
Yeah.
Don't confuse South Korea with North Korea. North
Right.
Korea has been an antagonist, and South Korea has been an ally. And this is just phenomenal growth. What we've seen from South Korea, and then you go to Mexico. You've heard recently that we've replaced NAFTA with a new agreement with Mexico and Canada. And I don't have figures for Canada today, but Mexico has been a long-time trade partner, and that's good news that we've got that worked out to replace NAFTA. Now, this is one we've talked about quite a bit. China, we just have one line here to compare it to 2017, because we just opened it up in May or June of last year.
Right.
You know, it's up, but it's not a significant number compared to Korea and Japan. So these are, except for Mexico, we're talking about Southeast Asia, Japan, South Korea, China. There's opportunities here, but reality is Japan and South Korea are much more meaningful trade partners. Of course, we showed Mexico. Canada is very important, and we value their partnership, and then of course the rest of the world we do value that. But today we're 13+% of our beef value or dollars come from exports.
Okay.
And it's very important. So to put it in terms of a market animal that's going through local markets, whether it's Hillsborough, Gallipolis, Zanesville, market animals today, over $300 in value comes from exports. So it's real. It's real dollars that we're looking at. So I just wanted to conclude today showing what we're at economically. And those charts, I think, are reflective of first 7 months of the year. So we've still got time, but it's important. And I want farmers to understand that we talk about trade. I know there's some folks that probably would like to put up, I hate to use this term, a wall, whether we're talking about immigrants, but if we're talking about trade, it needs to be a two-way street.
Right,
and Canada and Mexico, NAFTA being replaced or fixed was important.
Yeah, I think so.
And for market stability, and I know grain farmers are concerned about China. There's a lot of our soybeans that get to China, and that bug hasn't been worked out yet. But so that's kind of where we're at, Duane. Those are topics we thought were timely to talk about. This is a nice shot, looking at green grass on a morning with some fog. Next time we visit, I don't think we're going to see as many leaves on the tree.
I don't think so, and that grass might be a little bit browner, maybe.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I hope it's not covered with snow.
Yeah, or maybe a nice frost or something.
Yeah. So that's what we got today, and I appreciate, as always, time to visit with you.
Yeah, it's always great. So we're out of time. So until next month, John, we'll talk to everybody later. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.